Good morning. This is Paul Petrov, and you are listening to episode number 24 of the morning show for managers. The topic for this morning is what determines the negative feedback to be motivating. One of the primary motivators of the people in teams is getting positive feedback. The main demotivator is getting negative feedback. Sometimes receiving negative feedback can have a strong motivating effect. The real question here is what determines if negative feedback is motivating? Negative feedback is in abundance during change from clients, colleagues, other managers, etc. So if managers support their people to use it as a motivator instead of a demotivator, it can significantly affect people's work both emotionally and rationally. In this episode, I will give some example and also provoke you to think about what you can do in order to make any kind of feedback that you get, especially the negative feedback, to turn it into a motivating feedback for change and growth. Some people say that negative feedback can positively affect them if it's given in the right way, well-intentioned, balanced, on time, etc. Others say that any negative feedback has a highly motivating effect if it is provided by a professional or respected person. Here, I think of Dr. House. He almost always points out the poor performance of the people in his team. To this, he adds outright insults garnished with sarcasm. And despite the constant bombardment of other doctors with negative feedback, Dr. House has a kind of charisma that attracts and keeps people around him. He doesn't keep them until they retire, but anyway, he keeps them. It turns out that if people work with a person they respect for their outstanding technical expertise, receiving negative feedback from them or from this expert can be motivating. In the previous two examples that I gave you, people accept negative feedback as motivating if something from the external environment meets their expectations. Here, the feedback is adequately provided or a respected expert gives it. However, this attitude puts people in a significant disadvantage, one in which they depend on someone else to motivate them. It's like outsourcing your motivation to a third party, and such a party probably does not care whether or not you are inspired at your work. Let's return to the source of motivation where it belongs from the very beginning, in the person himself, not in someone else's expertise, not in other people's skills for giving feedback. It's only in the person himself depends. This is where the source of motivation is. Now, the crucial question becomes a little more guiding here, and here it is. What in each person turns negative feedback into motivating? So, don't dream about people giving you professionally negative feedback to sandwich it or to be very timely. No, forget about this. Don't dream about this. What can you do in order to make any negative feedback motivating? Just answer. Think about it. What makes negative feedback motivating is the way, and this is my answer, what makes a negative feedback motivating is the way one looks at it. And here you have two ways to look at the feedback. Does the person see it as an external advice on how to improve his work, or he sees it as an accusation that he is not doing well and he's not up for the job? You see, the first way, if you look at it as a free advice, whatever the negative feedback is, this is the first way, just to look at it as a advice for your personal development. Or if you look at it, the other way to look at it is as an accusation that you are not good enough for the job. Of course, if it is the first way, things are not taken personally, and one can become even better at what one does. If we look at the feedback in the second way, then negative feedback will be a reason for self-doubt and excuses. Here, the good thing is that how a person looks at feedback does not depend on someone else, but only on the person himself. But to look at it requires first sparking the ego, then the desire for development, then the desire for actual change, and nothing more. Here's an exercise you can do to accept negative feedback in a motivating way over time. Here's the exercise. Get negative feedback that applies to your colleagues, regardless if feedback is written or oral. Take this feedback, which applies to another person, and see which part of it might be valid for you. You know very well that this feedback is not for you, but if you recognize something that may apply to you, it may be an idea for your improvement. To make the exercise even more interesting, you can get your team together and have everyone give negative feedback to a random colleague on one sheet of paper. Then take all the sheets and shuffle them without seeing their contents. Then let each person get a sheet of paper that does not apply to him, but read it as if it were written just for him. This exercise will help people not to take the negative feedback too personally, but to accept it with desire and willingness to change. I'll give another example. This is the third example, how you can learn not to take it personally. For example, the books that I publish on Amazon, at this point of recording the podcast, do not have any reviews yet. But I look at other books, at other reviews, and I look only on the negative reviews. And I think how these negative reviews that are meant for other books and other authors can be relevant to me and what I can do about them. Of course, some things are not relative, but some of the negative reviews, I see that they are very, very relative also for my writing, although I haven't received any negative reviews on Amazon. Now, in the end of the podcast, here are 2 questions for you and for your self-reflection. Question number 1. Which negative feedback you give to your colleagues is also valid for you? Which negative feedback that you give to your colleagues is also valid for you? And question number 2. What will change in your daily work if you apply the negative feedback you give others to yourself? Now, if you see something that is not done right and you give this feedback to your colleagues, either verbally or just mentally, if you apply the very same feedback to your line of work, what are you going to change? The best way to inspire change in others is to be a role model. So instead of course, you have to give them feedback, but before giving them feedback, make sure that you apply it for yourself and see what happens. This was for today. Have a good day and until next time.